And welcome. This is the Gillmor Gang. I'm Steve Gillmor, and this is the last show of
the last show?
Whatever, yeah. It's always the last show until it's the next one. And this one is the last show of 2009, unless something exciting happens tomorrow, which I doubt. And well, we're trying to get one of our friends from the late great friend feed to join us, but he may not be available. So let's start with Robert Scoble. Welcome, Robert.
Hey, how are you doing?
Doing okay.
Last show of the year, yay!
And then joining us, a special guest that I'm very pleased to have again on the show. He was one of the principals of the first TechCrunch real-time crunch up, and is a board member of the real-time board, and he owns just about every property in the real-time space, or has some piece of it, and that's John Borthwick. Welcome, John.
Hi, Steve.
Thanks for joining us again. And also joining us with less plastic that he's unwrapping than he did the last time he was on the show is Mike Arrington. Welcome, Mike.
Hey. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, everything else.
Okay, so and Paul Buchheit may join us or may not. It just depends on whether he's risen off of his deathbed or not.
Steve, what's the URL to tweet this out? I have no idea.
Building43.com/realtime.
Is that live? They've been having a lot of downtime, haven't they?
Scoble?
Who's been having downtime?
I think he means Rackspace.
No.
How's that going? It seems to be going better, right?
So far this week.
Excellent. There's I saw an interesting article about about Microsoft and Azure, and people starting to sort of decide whether or not the cloud is real or not. John Borthwick, I know this isn't directly on topic, but what's your take on the cloud, on cloud computing? Do you think that it's real? Sorry, Mike?
Oh, I just had this huge echo, and then I realized it's because I was watching.
Yeah, you need to turn the sound off. It's, like, turn your radio down.
No, I'm good now.
2009.
I'm a tech expert.
John?
Steve.
Cloud computing.
Cloud computing. So, I mean, I think that it's the end of the year, so it's always, good. So it's the end of the decade, right? I mean, I think that many of the shifts that we're seeing taking place today are being driven by sort of the fundamental shifts that we talked about a decade ago. Move on to the server, cloud computing, ASP, proliferation of broadband, untethered broadband. And I think that we're now seeing all of those things move into market, and we're seeing a whole bunch of services emerge that are fairly different from, I think, what most people expected, because I think most of the predictions in a decade ago were sort of that thicker pipes and pushing things onto the server side would just result in the same services but available anywhere. And I think we've seen a whole bunch of new services that have emerged given the new infrastructure. So cloud computing important.
So when you say that these are new services, some people would say that they're just more real-time versions of the old services.
Well, I mean, I think that
what's a disruptive thing that you think has occurred? I would suggest that the iPhone was the most disruptive thing that has occurred in the last 10 years.
I would say I would add to that list everything from Amazon Web Services to obviously the Twitter ecosystem to search monetization, just as a short list of things that have fundamentally changed the way we do what we do.
Mike Arrington.
What's the question?
what's fundamentally changed in the past 10 years? And, you know, did any of it surprise you? I mean, you were, I don't know, I think you were in high school 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, I think I was in seventh grade 10 years ago, which makes me 18 now.
You've done very
No, I
well
was
for yourself.
no. 10 years ago, things hadn't fallen apart yet. So 10 years ago, the beginning of 2000, I think people were starting to think that things were maybe too good to last, and some people were saying that they couldn't last and we were in a bubble. But times were still pretty good. I think it was when the market first crashed. Was it March of 2000? I think. Yeah, it was March of 2000 when the Nasdaq crashed, and things from there. But it wasn't until '01 that things got really bad. And what's changed since then? The way we use the web. I mean, back then, I didn't do much content creation on the web. Maybe a review on Amazon or something, but mostly I bought stuff and read stuff. And today, the vast majority of what I do on the web is reading links from friends and creating my own content.
Blogging was fairly disruptive in the last 10 years. It allowed people like Mike to come and get known and build a business.
So, that would, you're suggesting that RSS and blogging were the major change in the last 10 years?
A major change that set up a whole raft of things, including later Twitter. But certainly that's one of the top, 5 or 10 things that happened in the last 10 years that really radically changed the world.
John Borthwick, do you think RSS is dead?
No, I don't think RSS is dead. I mean, I think that I think that RSS has become part of the infrastructure of what is emerging as the real-time cloud, and people were referring to as the real-time cloud. And I think that RSS is almost blended into the infrastructure of that. I think as a service, as a consumer service, I think RSS was never got broad adoption as a consumer service for a host of reasons.
So you mentioned search monetization as being a significant change. Do you think that RSS has an economic model?
Well, I mean, so you asked the question of sort of big disruptive technologies the last 10 years, and I sort of drew the line back to post the crash. I know it's not quite 10 years, but in my mind, sort of after the crash, everything changed on how we sort of think about websites and everything from how we think about them to how we monetize them to how we build and create them. And so that's sort of the demarcation point for me. Monetization on the web was transformed by the Google AdSense model. I think that we have not seen a stream-based monetization platform at scale yet. So you could argue that FeedBurner did some monetization of RSS, and it certainly, they certainly made some money at that. But I don't think there is an example I can think of that's at scale.
So you don't think that there's been, I mean, when RSS started to emerge and when Dave Weiner started to convince various, mainstream media publications to support it, he suggests that that's when it took off. I would suggest that it was a combination of that and the fact that anybody could now publish to the network and essentially be a node on the information network. I think those two things together was what was disruptive about it. But at the time, there was a lot of anger and mistrust and some outright attempts at pushing it back as being I don't want to go into all the history of it, but the point is that are we in a position today of looking at whatever this is that's happening now, which is sometimes characterized as Twitter and sometimes as real time? Are we looking at something today that is still emerging and is going to be seen as a much bigger transition than, or at least on a par with what RSS was, 8-10 years ago?
I think so. I mean, I think that I think it's going to be actually on a par to the transformation that took place with Google search.
So this is the argument that that search is going to be disrupted by essentially people search. Mike Arrington,
I think that
sorry,
I
go
think
ahead.
that I think that it's the fun sort of the fun way to set it up is just pure disruption, but I actually think it's additive to search. So I don't think search goes away, but I think we over-indexed in the last decade on the utility of page-based search. Over-index mean that we as users, and so as in general as a market, we assumed that Google page-based search would solve every problem. And I think that there's now enough out there to say to me that those people are finding a lot of stuff, starting their day, finishing their day, organizing their stuff in a way that is orthogonal to traditional page-based search.
Mike Arrington, what do you think
About what?
about what we're talking about? Search, the importance of search. I'm not a big fan of search myself, so others
Doesn't
are.
the internet begin and end with search?
I don't think so. Does it?
I don't know. It's where I start my day.
You search? You actually use Google?
Really?
Yeah, I use Google. I used to use Twitter search quite a bit, but those guys gave away the family jewels, so I don't need to do that anymore. I just do everything at Google. But yeah.
Do you agree with that? That the family jewels have been given away, John?
We're shareholders in Twitter. I can't speak to the family jewels. I think that the implementation and integration of the Twitter search results into Google and into Bing, but in Google, was certainly very different than what I expected.
How do you mean?
Well, a couple of things. First of all is that as far as I can understand, the Google guys are imputing a relevance against real time. So they will take a particular term, let's say Tehran, and they'll impute whether there is actually something that is going on in the real time sphere that is relevant to that particular search. And then they got literally a category, the real time category, that moves up and down on your search results depending on how relevant real time is to that appropriate search. It's a very clever implementation. It's a very interesting way of integrating in real-time search into the general all-encompassing search engine. I think the experience today and what they rolled out a couple of weeks back, I find it to be cluttered, confusing, and surprising for Google on how it was implemented. And I thought it would remain in a beta in the Google, what was it? It was in the Google Trends area, in the Zeitgeist or the Trends area. I thought it would remain there for a while, and I was very surprised it was rolled out to all users.
Do you think it was rushed out to at least match Bing and not let Bing get a foothold up in the real-time search results?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think it's remarkable how much we're seeing the incumbent search engines and players here. Search engines, I would say Facebook, I place in that category too, respond to the dynamic competitive environment that we got here. And
right.
So I think it was absolutely rushed out.
I've been arguing with Matt Cutts at Google on Twitter about this because I think I agree with you. I think the real-time results are really badly done, and I'm wondering how are they going to get the authority and credibility of the results to be much, much better than they are today? Because if you search on Obama, for instance, you're going to see all sorts of crap in there that just doesn't have anything to do with anything that anybody would be searching for.
Right. I think that there's a bunch of people out there who've done posts and who've compared what the Google guys are pushing into the real-time bucket versus Bing and versus what's in the straight up Twitter stream. And I think that how they're imputing relevancy to, where does it slide up and down on the page, I think I'd love to get a much better understanding of that. I know we're never going to get an understanding of the algorithm that powers that, but just as a user, it seems to pop up sometimes, and then other times it's not there, even in things which I know should be real time. And then the subset of things within there are often very different to what is actually on Twitter search. They're often out of date, meaning that they're 5 minutes late, which I find remarkable because these guys now have the files.
That's real important when you have something like the earthquake that just happened an hour or two ago. Thousands of people start writing about their experiences, but a lot of those aren't really authoritative. So, in fact, somebody in New York could start talking about an earthquake and they show up in the results. Why the heck are they there? I want to know. The results that should show up are the more authoritative ones that actually have something useful to add to that page. And it doesn't seem like Google has a real good clue about how to do that.
I think that I would agree. I don't think we're not seeing it yet. I would say that there are many gestures and metadata that's embedded in the stream that have not been exposed yet, or not been analyzed as part of this attempt at relevancy.
You mean like retweets or the lists that somebody's on?
Correct.
What do you see as the impact of? What do you see as the impact? What do you see as the impact of the in-house retweets that Twitter adopted? Do you see it as providing more value, or as people like Daryl Basanjo suggest that it's effectively cutting off significant value, such as comments that people make as they retweet?
Is that directed at me or Scoble?
Well, I mean, Scoble and Mike are free to jump in anytime they want.
I mean, the execution of retweets, the templated retweet. Let me sort of speak first from a personal experience, because that's sort of how I use this thing. I actually, unsurprisingly, I use TweetDeck most of the time, and TweetDeck offers the ability for me to be able to either send a templated sort of new retweet 2.0 or the original retweets form. And I leave that option open for me, and I would say 75% of the time I use the old form of retweet, because I want to annotate the tweet in some form. I want to add some, hopefully some value, but I want some data and some gestures to be embedded in that. How do I think about it generally, Steve? I mean, I understand the arguments to the new form of retweets. So some people love it. There's other people who don't like it. I think that there were clearly spam issues that were happening within the existing retweet form. I think that the overall trend to sort of to Twitter is over time. I often look at the Twitter stream and think it looks like sort of the old HTML in the sort of 10, 15 years ago, when you view source and you take a look at a page. And so the fact that a layer of UI is being placed on top of that doesn't surprise me. But I think that the functionality of the old retweet is something that I personally use more.
So what is the value proposition of the new version? I mean, when you say you do it 25%, what is that? Why do you do that?
Well, I think that for a simple social gesture, saying somebody just sent out this tweet, I'm going to send it out, and it's going to, in a non-duplicated fashion, go out to my followers, right? So that you see it if you follow me, but if you've already seen it from the source, you don't see it. I think that is a more elegant way of just pushing out the same content. So the deduplication, I think, is valuable. I also think it's valuable that you've got the sort of the authenticity of the entire message is there and is contained and is sort of certified by the retweet form. I think it actually becomes a simpler gesture for new users, which I'm sure was part of the thinking behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I also like it, John. I like the new retweet because of the retweet page, so I can see who has retweeted items, and how many people have retweeted each item. It's very visually much more useful than the old retweet was. But I just wish they had never called it retweeting. I think it's more a
It's
copy
another
of friend
gesture.
feeds. It's a gesture like it's much closer to friend feeds likes, or Facebook's likes, because they've copied friend feed too. Where it's really nice on a mobile phone. You click once and it goes to everybody who's following you, and I like that gesture.
Yeah,
Well,
I
the thing
agree.
I
I would
like
have
about
called it
it,
something else because I think that the retweet, as it has been used historically, has gained an entire sort of organic set of relevancy and curation around it, which is valuable, which is just different.
well, I think that the value of the concentric circles of affinity groups is the value that is yet to be fully explored or even understood by any of the major players. They don't seem to be moving in that direction particularly rapidly. That's one of the reasons that I find your position and role in this ecosystem to be significant. TechCrunch has reported at various times about, I mean, Mike can address this, about Bitly becoming more aggressive as a competitor in terms of using that referential data that's being collected about what's being clicked on and by whom. Is that accurate? I mean, Bitly Pro, is that the nomenclature for an attempt at moving into that space?
This is a question for John.
Yeah, I'm asking John. Sorry, I'm sitting here looking to people, and I think that they can see me back. So
Bitly Pro is a service that we pushed out for publishers, and when I use the word publishers, I want to use it in the very general. In my mind, it's a very general sense. In other words, it's anybody who publishes anything online and who is serious about that, about curating that publishing stream. And so it's everything from traditional publishers all the way through to people who just set up on a blogging platform and are publishing there. So Bitly Pro is targeted at that group, and it's a set of services that we started to roll out a couple of weeks ago. And we've actually, in the last month, we've rolled out two things that both of them relate to the underlying data set of within Bitly. First is Bitly Pro, and then the second is Bitly TV, which is at bitly.tv, and which is a sort of auto-generated view of all of the media flowing through Bitly at any one point in time. And so your hypothesis, Steve, is right. We have now, yesterday, and we're going through the holiday period now, so it's a slow period, but there was maybe about 82 million Bitly links that were clicked on yesterday. And so when you sift through those links on an aggregate basis, in the case of, let's say, Bitly TV, and you filter through what are just the ones which media type equals video, many of whom are YouTube, but many of whom are on other video platforms. And then you look at the velocity of that click stream. You obviously look at the number of clicks, but you impute a series of ways of looking at counting the data so that it's not just pure click based. It's looking at how quickly things are moving up in the stream, and then you aggregate them up. That you begin to get a very interesting look at what's happening in the real-time web, and that's what we're doing at the TV.
do you have any kind of metrics or hierarchy or ranking that you're applying to people based on retweets or any kind of social gestures?
Yes. So, the ranking that we use is, unsurprisingly, we call it BitRank. And also
call it Borthwick rank. I mean, PageRank doesn't refer to pages; it refers to Larry Page.
And all the gestures are being created by the bits that are flowing through the system, which are being created by users. So, So BitRank is derived from a combination of understanding all the data in the stream, the velocity of data in the stream, and then some of the social gestures around that.
How do you model that?
How do I model it? You mean what's the
how do you
algorithm behind it?
model a
What's the
social
weighting?
gesture? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that the simplest ones that we see within Bitly, the gestures associated with people, create a link, and so they actually go to a page, they shorten it, and they create. Second is that they share, and thirdly is that people click on that associated link. And then you go back to the creation, the original creation, and you can look at the authority of the individual who created it, and you can impute the authority of them within the social stream. So it's a subset of that data that we're using right now, and as you would well imagine, the data is it's a huge data stream that's and the figuring out what are the signals which are most effective to rank and sort it is something that's hard.
Robert, jump in.
One feature I'd love to see in Bitly is the ability to see who else has shared this link before me. So, if I put a link to TechCrunch, for instance, in there, I'd love to see who else has retweeted it or shared it or created a Bitly link. That would be very useful. I'm not sure if you're working on something like that.
So, Robert, that's so you can do that today if you shorten either on the site or on a service like TweetDeck or Seismic, where you can put in your API key.
Okay.
And so that you have a Bitly user account, you have an API key that's associated with that account, and then you can go and you can take any Bitly link, you shove a plus on the end of it, just a simple plus, and you'll see the information page around that link. On that page, you'll see the other users who've also shortened that link, and people talking about that link, and also the aggregate traffic for the entire population of people who went to that link, of which you are one user, I'm another, Arrington's another, Gillmor's another, and then you add up all of those to make the aggregate traffic to that link.
Do you display that for everybody in public, and do you keep that ranking? Like if Mike shares a link first, and I share it second, and Alan Stern shares it third, do you show that so that in the future we can show who was the fastest at sharing links?
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah, and we use the backtype API on that info page. You could see on the bottom of it, you actually see the stream of people who shared the link, starting with the first person, and the sort of so you can see some of the history, and so that's available today.
Avatar. Can we change the subject to anything else?
No, one last thing, Mike. Before
you could try, Mike.
I mean, you could put a bullet in my head. I mean, are we still talking about the Bitly API right now? I mean,
no, I'm heading somewhere. So, do you think?
Let's talk about Avatar.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. John, do you think that Twitter is ever going to have a new display surface that lets third-party developers display metadata about that tweet, like what you just told me that you're keeping track of?
I don't know. You mean sort of like you're talking about your super tweet concept?
Yeah. A new display surface underneath each tweet, which would let people like you or even Twitter put metadata about that tweet, like who's shared that link, who's retweeted it, how many times it's been retweeted. Oh, God. All right, we're going to talk about Avatar, I guess.
You think? Okay, so what about Avatar, Mike?
Well, did everybody see it? Everybody?
Yeah, I've only seen it in 3D, so I really don't know what the experience is like.
I've seen it 3 times now in 3D. I almost saw it in IMAX, but I didn't. John, did you see it?
I did.
What did you think? Scale of 1 to 10. 11?
I thought it was a 15 as a visual experience. I thought the narrative was like a 3.
A 3? Not even passable?
Well, give us an example of a good narrative in movies.
I'll tell you, Steve. I'll tell you the example I'll use is that
The Godfather.
I was telling my wife about it, and I could, at every juncture of the narrative, I asked her, what do you think happened next? And she said, well, gee, he fell in love with the prettiest girl in the village who happened to be, and I said, who? And she said, the daughter of the chief. And then I said, what happened to the chief?
Well, you married her, for God's sake. I mean, of course she's smart. So what?
No, but I just think that, look, I think that what Cameron did was brilliant, and he also did what's been done time and time again, which is you just tap into a narrative that is very well known, because I think the visual experience of the thing would be fairly overwhelming if the narrative was too intricate. So I think that, similar to Star Wars, that used a narrative that's been running around for a good 600-700 years, I think that Cameron did the same thing.
Do you think it was a more important movie than Star Wars?
Yes, I do.
No.
You do?
At the time?
In
way.
Indiana Jones?
At the time? I walked
No
into
way. Star Wars introduced all sorts of music to us and radically changed the technology of movie making. I think Avatar gets close to changing the technology, but didn't come close to...
what did Star Wars do to change the technology? I mean, you had movies... I mean, you had, even Star Trek, the TV show, had some basic...
No. The first Star...
Effects,
we got to go back to 1977. The fourth Star Trek, or the Star Wars.
Yeah, but those special effects weren't new at the time, were they?
There was a lot of innovation.
It was the first motion control film,
on the first Star Wars back in 1977.
Okay.
All right, so I disagree that the impact of Star Wars when it was released was phenomenal. It changed the movie business. It set up a whole bunch of kinds of films that could be made that Avatar is one of, rather than the other way around. But I also think I'm not trying to put words in Mike's mouth, because I know Mike's over the moon about this thing. I was, there were moments when in 3D when you're watching, a scene inside the cockpit of one of these, carriers that they're flying around in, where I was just watching out the window like I was there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was extraordinary what they accomplished here. The scenes where they're inside one of these robot plants or whatever it is, and all this stuff's going on in the background, you start to forget that is the same kind of animation as the stuff that is impossible to produce, because in fact that's impossible to produce too. Those things don't exist, but they looked and felt completely real.
To bring this back to Gillmor Gang, do you think that Avatar is going to drive sales of 3D home screens that the industry is trying to foist on us?
Well, I wear these in the shower because what are you talking about?
Well, one thing I don't get is can't they just broadcast it in 3D, or even just make the DVD and you put on these same glasses and it would work? I mean, it's nothing that special, is it, on the screen, or no?
Yeah, no, I think they can. In fact,
I think they could.
I've seen
but
a 3D
broadcasting.
broadcast.
So a couple of thoughts, because so I think that actually, from the studio's perspective, the hope is that this reinvigorates theatrical theater going, right? And so the reason, when you asked the question, what do I think is more important than Star Wars, I thought about it for a minute, and the reason I said yes was that I think that what you've now seen is a new form of the movie making medium, which opens up a whole sort of set of experiences, many of which are physical shaking chairs and stuff like that in the movie theater, and turns theatrical movie going back into an event.
This is the smell-o-vision argument.
Yes, I don't think it comes into the home. And can it come into the home? Yes, it can. But doing HD of 3D is expensive and hard, just because you've got to send now down, how many is it? 3 slightly off versions of the same.
Will it fit on a Blu-ray? I mean, if it fits on a Blu-ray and we can put these glasses on in our living room, it seems like they'd sell it. Right?
I agree with you. John doesn't.
No, I think that this is, I think that if you look at theatrical movie going, the average age of a moviegoer in the United States now is above 50. And so, the whole theatrical business.
Wait, did you just make that up, or is that a real number?
No, it's a number from, in my old days, Mike, when I was at Time Warner, I used to know this stuff. But so if you look at the way that the windows are being shrunk in the movie business today, and as they're moving product faster and faster to DVD, the effect of that is that they're cannibalizing the theatrical window, and this entire business is based on the premise of controlled windows. Whether you like that or you don't like that, that's how they've built the business, and all the margins associated with the business are built out that way. And so they've got to figure out a way of driving back in real value into the theatrical piece, and I think this is a huge step forward in that.
Hey, Steve, one thing I was hoping we were going to talk about today is what people think the impact of the Nexus One will be. Because it's by the time we're on the Gang again, it'll have launched, right?
Yep.
Well, we're not supposed to know that, but yes.
No, I think T-Mobile's officially saying they're selling it on the 5th now. I think it's basically confirmed.
Oh, they have said that.
Yeah, like T-Mobile reps are telling people that they're going to have it available on the 5th.
Well, I'd like to hear everybody else's opinion, but what's yours, Mike?
Actually, I think the phone is significantly better than the current iPhone, and I think what we have is a legitimate two-horse race, and I don't think we're looking at an 80-20 market. I think we're looking at two companies that are building amazing phones and pushing each other hard, and it's going to be great for the consumer. I think that Apple will come out with a great phone in the middle of next year, and I think Google will continue to innovate. But the phone is amazing.
But Mike, you said that about the Droid. So how does this compare to the Droid? What's so much better about this than the Droid?
Well, so the counter argument everyone uses against me is just that. It's like, well, you just said that about the Droid. And in fact, I said that about the MyTouch. I changed the iPhone for the MyTouch and thought it was pretty good. A few flaws, but generally pretty good as long as you didn't run too many apps at one time. The Droid blew the MyTouch away, and I think the Droid, particularly paired with Google Voice, is a way better phone than the iPhone. But the Nexus One seems to be a better phone, period. I mean, with Google Voice, hands down, it's the best mobile phone experience you can have in the world. But even on its own, because most people don't use Google Voice, it's just the hardware specs across the board are better. It's a smaller case, bigger screen, way more resolution.
Wait a second, more resolution than the Droid?
No, it's the same. I believe it's the same resolution as the Droid.
Because that's already a really high resolution screen.
And then the interface, as you've seen from some of these videos, the interface is getting really good. The interface isn't as slick as the iPhone, but there are some things on the Droid that are really nice. The back button, for example, is very intuitive, and really the iPhone needs a simple back button. And the camera on the device is a lot better than the Canon camera I had a couple of years ago. So it just seems to me that it's a real winner.
One thing you never talked about was Google Maps, and for me, that's the selling point for Droid. When I use that up in Portland, and it has turn by turn, and it shows you the map evolving in front of you, so you know exactly where to turn, and it shows you pictures when you arrive. It's just stunning, and the UI there, I think, is an indicator of where Google is going to take the OS. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a smart opinion, and it's a killer feature on the phone that Apple doesn't yet have.
So what do you think? What do you think is the driver? I mean, if you say it's not an 80-20 experience, which, by the way, I agree with you. I think it's going to go to 50-50 pretty rapidly. Why are 30% of the people who normally would be waiting or jumping into the iPhone, why are they going to switch right now?
Well, an unlocked phone is a really nice thing to have, I'll tell you that. And it's sort of an advanced feature, but for anybody that travels, to be able to keep your phone and simply put in a new SIM card when you get to wherever you're going, it's really nice. To be able to break away from the carriers is really nice. But I wouldn't be so sure that Google doesn't have a few other tricks up their sleeve. One of the stories we've been tracking and wrote about early is that we believe Google's looking at a voice-only type option where you buy the phone, probably unlocked, maybe not. You have a data plan through AT&T or T-Mobile. You're paying a fairly small amount for the data plan, probably $30 to $40 a month for unlimited data, and there is no phone number attached to it. Google then assigns you a Google Voice phone number, and you make calls through VoIP. The Gizmo acquisition they just recently made helps them with making that that sort of last step of a VoIP call. And I think you've got something really interesting there, where the carriers are literally, at that point, there's no argument. It's a dumb pipe. It's just data.
Right. So why would they want to support that?
Who? The carriers?
Yeah.
Well, they do it now. If you take a BlackBerry device, let's say an unlocked BlackBerry device, into an AT&T store, they'll sell you a data-only plan. We've actually confirmed this ourselves. So, in my post on this a month ago, we had a pretty good source indicating that AT&T was amenable to doing a deal around the phone. Now, AT&T won't do a data plan only around the iPhone. So they do have some policies on this, but they will do these for other phones, and we think they might be doing one with Google.
Doesn't this give AT&T an escape out of the Apple deal?
Why do they want an escape out of the Apple deal?
Well, I mean, if you're right, and this device is comparable to, or in some cases better than the current iPhone, isn't that going to give? I mean, where does AT&T go? They've been sort of both ahead of the curve and also kind of locked in at the beck and call of Apple for 2 years now. I mean, what's their exit plan if say Verizon suddenly picks up the iPhone?
Well, that's as it should be. I mean, Verizon will pick up the iPhone next year. I'm sure AT&T will sell the Droid. That's just competition. I don't know what they do. I don't really care. I'm not a market strategist for AT&T, but I know as a consumer, we have lots and lots of choice, and prices are coming down. It's great. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this year, a lot of us on our normal mobile experience no longer are using minutes. We're just using VoIP. That's up to Google.
Do you agree with that, John?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that it's going to be a great boon to end users that we're going to have another phone in market that has the power and the platform power that the iPhone has. But I also think that in 2010, 2011, we're going to see a lot of fragmentation on these platforms, because I think that the vendor providers are competing to pull services and to lock people into services and service plans. And so it's great that we're being untethered from the telephony or carrier service plan, but now I've got to get untethered from the iTunes service plan. And I've got to get untethered from the Google service plan or the Google Voice service plan.
Yeah,
it's the last separation that I think is, to me, is the problem here.
Yeah, I think that brings up the other potential. I don't know if Mike was referring to this when he said that the Google had some other tricks up their sleeve, but the whole tablet environment, to me, that seems like the Kindle has gotten a little bit too far out ahead in terms of locking up the publishers. And I think Apple and potentially Google are going to reach in and try and disrupt that. Fragment the market, as you suggest.
Yeah.
Do you think that the magazine business can go through some sort of value-added service, sort of a avatar for magazines, kind of rebirth?
To rebirth the physical object of the magazine, I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be a fascinating year next year, because we're going to have the arrival of these. If I read this stuff right, was going to have the arrival of an Apple slate of some kind, and that to me is going to be. So does Apple manage to port everything over to the iPhone, all the apps that are developed for the iPhone? Can they port into the slate environment? And the content same. Yes.
What, no? What is your reader? Your Twitter reader?
TweetDeck.
TweetDeck? No, I'm talking about on the iPhone. You have a product, right?
So TweetDeck.
Okay, so
TweetDeck is an iPhone and an Air app.
So in other words, TweetDeck could blow up to the slate fairly simply.
Yeah, it could. The TweetDeck could blow up to the slate form representation fairly simply. But that's great. But that is the next stage is, or the vendor conflict question in my mind is, so I've got a great little app on my iPhone, which is my my Kindle app, right? And allows me to read my Kindle books, but not my periodicals, not my newspapers, right?
Right, exactly.
And when I get that onto the slate, does it now let me read anything? Does it is that
Why
in
do you
Apple's
think that
interest?
why do you think that they don't allow? I mean, I've noticed that myself since I got the Kindle a few weeks ago, that I can't move any of the periodicals over. Why do you think that that's being done? Who's stopping that? Who's the Steve Jobs behind that move?
Well, one of the things that that's me answer a different question, but it may be related, is I talked to some of the people in the magazine, periodical, newspaper business about their Kindle products, because their Kindle products are the magazines and newspapers I've always found very difficult to navigate and read on the Kindle. And somebody said to me in that business, they said, what Amazon forced us to do was to treat everything. They've essentially got one form factor that goes in, and you have to make your magazine look like a book. So it's at a very abstract and high level, it's remarkable. It's like we've reached digital age, and now we've got a single printing press through which everything has to go through in order to get onto the Kindle. And so I think that there's a very structured and simplistic sort of model that Amazon have for their for taking in the data, wrapping around their DRM around it, and then placing it onto the device.
All right, so you think it's a technical issue at the moment?
Either it's that, or they didn't do the rights, right? So either they didn't go to the newspapers and get the rights to display it on the iPhone. I don't know.
So do you think that part of the motivation for an Apple slate is to move in a la iTunes and try and grab that market before it escapes to a broader device audience?
Before it matures, sure. But goes through the iterations. It's fascinating if you look at the iterations of the question you asked. I'm sitting here thinking, okay, Amazon doesn't particularly want you to get your magazines and newspapers on the iPhone, right? Because they're not going to use your Kindle anymore. You just bought an object in order to get
I'm not sure that's
account.
accurate. I mean, I'm reading a book on one of the Beatles. You heard of them? And I read it on the Kindle as my device of choice. In fact, I even have a hardbound version of it, which I never use. And then if I'm going out and I want to just, I'm bored or something, waiting for somebody to, my daughter to show up at the BART station, I'll flip open the iPhone and read it there. But it's not an optimal experience like and the battery time. I mean, that, to me, the idea that the slate is somehow going to solve the battery problem, that's the thing that I can't believe that they're going to come up with an experience that by itself is going to be an effective improvement over the Kindle. I'm sure I'm wrong about that because Apple has confounded expectations and created devices that we want for a long time, and I imagine they'll continue.
Well, Steve,
to
I think if if a device has a 5-hour life, isn't that good enough?
Yeah, you think a device, so it's going to be color, right?
Yeah, I think you could create a 10-inch LCD, not OLED, which is cheaper. I don't know what the deal is with 10-inch OLEDs right now, but you could create a 10-inch tablet computer running the NVIDIA Tegra line. It's going to run Flash video. It's going to be a great browser. It's going to be able to do anything you need it to do. And you could easily stack in enough battery to keep the weight under 2 pounds and stack in enough battery to have 5, 6, 7, 8 hours of battery life. No problem.
And the usage model of this would be, what percent of it would be reading publications and what percent would be watching video?
I think you'd find some people reading books on it, but I think the main use would be as they check email on it, things like that. But I think the main use would be going to bed, sitting up in bed before you go to bed, pull it up and watch a movie on Hulu or YouTube or something like that. I think is a main use. And then with Apple, I think they're going to be really fun game devices, like really really cool game devices. So you'll see kids sitting in the back of cars playing these things the entire ride. I think it's going to be really fun. But I wouldn't worry too much about battery life. You're not looking for 30, 40 hours of battery life on these things like the Kindle. You're going to have to recharge it periodically. but there are ways to deal with that. You plug it in the car. There are accessories that increase battery life, things like that.
Steve,
Right.
I've been flipping through the National Geographic here, and the imagery on screen is stunning. And this is the kind of content that I expect to see, at least at first, on the tablet. That Apple has. I also bought a book on the iPhone called Level 26, which was done by the guy who created CSI, and it has video and beautiful text and graphics in a graphical novel that's interactive, and that's a new kind of content that I think we're going to start seeing more of in the near future.
Yeah, I don't think that stuff's going to work.
You don't think so? Why not?
Well, because it's not based on search, and it's not based on social discovery. The two ways that I see most of what I see on the internet is either I go to Google or I see a link on Twitter or Facebook or email and go to it. That stuff isn't really linkable very well. It's bandwidth heavy. I think that
yeah, but haven't
people are
we
just
solved the
not gonna
bandwidth? I mean, we now get YouTube HD videos, which are stunning, right?
Yeah,
and
but
we
they're
don't
linked
think
to.
it.
No, that's sure, that's great, but you can link to them and you see links. This stuff, can you link to it? How does that work? Can anyone see it? Is it if it's behind a paywall, you have to subscribe to it and you send out a link? Are there even links? All that stuff has been proven to not work, and I wouldn't invest in anything, time or money, in anything that breaks away from the proven model of the web, which is allowing search engines and your friends to direct you to what you want to see. For the same reason why, if I'm sitting here with my computer and I happen to have I don't have it next to me, but an Economist magazine sitting here as well,
Yeah.
I'm not going to pick up the magazine and read it. I'm going to be online doing stuff. It will always take precedence. And so if you have this device, what's going to remind you to go open up the application that lets you look at National Geographic? You're going to be too busy browsing the web and looking at all that stuff. So I just don't think it's going to be successful.
So do you think it's going to be as disruptive? I don't, as the iPhone was. I mean,
What?
the Apple tablet, if indeed that exists, or a Google tablet. Do you think they're going to be disruptive in precisely the same way? Or are they going to be, as I think John was suggesting earlier, that they're going to be part of a channel that is going to allow a company like Apple to be able to maintain a value add across the iPhone and a slate, for example?
What I think is do you want to go first, Robert?
I was just going to say that I don't think it's going to disrupt the tech industry the way the iPhone did. The iPhone, clearly disrupted Nokia and Microsoft and other players. I think it will disrupt the content industry that's making these beautiful imagery. Whoever can get me to visit a page that has this content on it is going to win. And I think Mike's right there. I just wonder that I don't agree that we're not going to see these kinds of rich experiences, especially as Silverlight comes along and becomes more ubiquitous. Now, Silverlight won't be on the Apple tablet probably at first, but already we have this kind of imagery on a.
I mean, if Flash will
Mac.
be, then so will Silverlight.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, Mike was describing a device that played Flash, so it'll play runtimes. It'll play Silverlight. So you were going to say, Mike?
I think that this is another step towards hardware becoming almost irrelevant. Where if you look, I forgot what movie it was, but there's some movie I recently saw where there was a computer and then there's another computer. It was science fiction, and it was playing with the screen. Actually, I think it was Avatar, and it was Avatar, and he like took the information on the screen and threw it onto a tablet that he then picked up and took over with him to a wall. And I think we're just going to see cheaper and cheaper and better and lighter hardware to the point where we really don't care what we're on. So I could see, I'm sitting here at my desk right now and I've got my laptop with my dual screen, but what I'd really like to do is just reach up and detach, the screen, and walk away into the other room to show my parents something or my friends something or whatever. I think that's what we're going to see, is just more of that, more syncing, more identity services, more cloud services, and the hardware becoming more and more in the background and just sort of a commodity.
All right, I want to wrap this up soon before you guys bail on
Oh,
me,
I
and
actually
then
have to go.
wrap it up soon.
Yeah, I actually have to jump off now, Steve.
All
It was
right.
a good show. See ya.
Thanks, Mike. So, John, can you give me as much as you're able or want to, can you give me a look at what's going on in your mind in this real-time experience as it's going to bake out over the next, say, 6 months?
I mean, I think that so I think what we're going to see in the next 6 to 12 months is we're going to see a whole set of services that start to filter and offer different ways to view the stream and manage the stream, right? So the uncluttered stream, we've talked about that a lot, and I think that we're still seeing sort of a gradual but steady advance towards that. I'm hoping that we're going to see as part of that, because I think it's an implicit part of it, is we're going to see a lot of services sort of sharing data back out of the services. I think it's when we look back on 2009, I think a couple of years from now, I think we'll be surprised. I hope we'll be surprised about how many services are consuming data feeds, but not spitting data feeds back out the other side.
Well, I mean,
So,
some of that is economics, or what's perceived as economics. We don't know what the deals that Twitter cut with Bing and with Google, for example. We don't know what their terms of reuse, and as far as I can tell from some of the stuff that I've heard, that Twitter is very careful, I'll put it that way, about allowing reuse that would tend to take away some of their innate advantages in terms of controlling that stream.
I think that the assumption that as people think about and republish or offer APIs into their stream of data, that people are also going to be concerned about what are the how that could impact their downstream business models. I think that's a safe assumption. I do think that though what we're seeing is gradually, sort of step by step, more and more companies are offering some form of access to those streams, and so it's been much of the debate of 2009 and part of 2008, getting access to the fire hose. I do think that as part of that debate, people lost sight of the fact that the garden hose and sort of many intermediary APIs were available on Twitter, and a lot of people did very interesting things with those. And so, granted is that having the full fire hose of data, I think that there's clearly value in excess of what was publicly available with that full fire hose. But I think there was a lot of stuff that was available, and a lot of people were doing stuff with that.
Well, I'd push back a little bit on that. In the last week, since FriendFeed has had its Twitter stream restored, I mean, it's a joy to use. I mean, it's to say that we haven't, whether or not these things have been available, there was a certain insecurity on the part of third-party developers about being able to, if they could get access today, would they have access tomorrow? What do they have to do to make sure that they're not pissing off the people who are providing access, et cetera, et cetera. I think that some of the announcements Twitter's made at Le Web, for example, and followed up on it in the last day or so, strongly suggest that we're going to see now that there's enough stability inside Twitter that there's going to be a fairly reliable access to that stream. But to say that was available, I mean, there are a lot of people who were trying very hard to be able to do that, other than people who were being given it directly, and then were stymied by business models or the lack of them. I mean, I just think that's a fact.
I hear you. Look, we at BetaWorks, we never had access to the fire hose. We would love to have had access to the fire hose, but with the garden hose or with the other hoses that were available, we certainly did a lot. And I didn't want to. I think that in the conversations about the fire hose, people lost sight of the fact that there were other data streams that were available. Mm-hmm. So But I think that generally the point is that, so Twitter is outputting a data stream, but then you've got all these other service providers, and my hope is that next year we're going to see a lot of those output data streams and have predictable, reliable business models that permit them to spit data out of their back end. Because let me give you an example that is, in the last couple of days, I've been voting on a competition here in New York called the Big Apps Contest. So New York City has released a whole bunch of data publicly that's been that services have articulated as APIs, and then you've got a couple of hundred app developers who've built stuff on top of that, and the city's doing a competition on that. And so in doing the judging for that competition and going through the apps, it really struck me that about 90% of the apps absorb data in, and then tried usually to have some visual representation of the data, but very few of them actually let any data come out the back end. Very few of them provided incremental value to the data and then spat it back out the back end, which to me is sort of what I hope to see will start to happen in 2010.
All right. I've got one more question about this, but Robert, do you have any questions just to wind this up?
No, not really.
So you're completely happy. You're back on friend feed, and you're moving off of Twitter lists because you haven't found anything that they're useful for, right?
No, I expect that Twitter lists, when matched in with search, will add some metadata that will be very important for authority and credibility.
So when do you think that'll happen?
2010, I'm pretty sure somebody's going to see the value of doing that, because if you look at the list, they have no spammers on them, and they're hand-picked, hand-curated by people, and that's a good filter to throw search through.
You agree with that, John?
Yes.
So you think lists have some sort of innate value to third-party developers?
Yes.
Can you describe it?
I think that, and to users. I mean, I think that lists have. We started working with lists. The team at TweetDeck started working with lists maybe a year ago. They called them groups, but and they were hugely popular. Twitter then integrated its list functionality, and so TweetDeck has extended its. And it's very important functionality.
So you feel it's a more effective encapsulation of a service inside Twitter than retweets?
Yes.
Okay. So 6 months from today, that'll be just about the middle of the year.
I'll be right back.
Yeah. We'll have seen in March. We'll see some. I think it's March or April. There'll be a Google I/O conference where Google will probably show whatever the next generation is of their device strategy. Perhaps some sort of a tablet at that point. Microsoft will be showing at Mix a fully operational Azure cloud. With services that are going to be built on by not just third-party developers, but I would suggest also companies like Rackspace and Amazon and others. You're going to see a very robust set of services that are available to this so-called interactive third-party swarm, where this kind of data is starting to be shared. I mean, to me, it's the same kind of idea as what Mike, I think, was predicting, as far as the effect on the carriers of Nexus One and the sort of democratization of access to this kind of data and the switch over to VoIP. Do you see that we're going to be looking back from that perspective, and we're going to see some sort of aha moment that it was as paramount as the one when friend feed went real time about a year, what was it, 8 months ago, when they finally fully went real time? I thought that was a transcendental moment in terms of of this architecture. And I
No, I
always,
remember. I remember. I mean, I read your post, the poetic one.
God knows which one you're referring to, but the I often feel that as a writer or as somebody who's doing this type of a conversation, that we're basically just in the backwash of the ideas that are circling. But I think Dave Weiner really kind of pioneered an environment where people could take their own inspiration in hand and actually run with it and create something that had an enormous effect on the network. And as much as we want to pigeonhole or even worse, Evan Williams and Twitter, as locking down something. In fact, I think that they were as surprised as any of us were at the power of what they unleashed. And I guess I see a real acceleration of ideas. Even Avatar, I think, is a it's been 5 years in the making, $500 million, but it, as you suggested, it's created the notion that if you take a iterative, viral approach to any undertaking, that you can do things that were conceived of as science fiction only a few years ago, and in fact now they're science fact. So I think that we're going to see something within the next 6 months that's going to really put the notion that real time is just a feature, or that it's some sort of impossible kind of value proposition to be able to contain or even leverage. I think that's going to become a ridiculous notion within the next 6 months. Do you agree with that?
I would agree. I mean, I think that the reason why I was pushing before about the importance of people pushing data out the back of their systems is that it's the connection between these services that is going to drive the data flow. And so we need to have reliable, sort of reasonable business agreements, even self-service agreements where you don't even have to sign up for a business agreement, where you can just have a click-through agreement to be able to have access to the data. And what's happening is that we're building and we're architecting a new layer of social interaction on the web. Yet, because all of these components are interconnected, I think we're going to have, we're going to astound ourselves at the innovation that can be possible here, because we're essentially building on each other's shoulders. And so it's, when I think about it sort of in domains, and this is closer to a domain like mathematics, where each invention sort of builds on the next, versus some domains where an invention can actually eradicate the entire platform. And
This
so,
is why, John, I really hope that we see a new display surface that we can have guys like you and TweetDeck and other players to hook into that display surface underneath my tweets or along with my tweets or something like that.
and that makes a ton of sense to me, Robert. I mean, I think that the pieces are now in place for all of this to come together in the next year or two. What needs to happen, though, in my mind, is that as these services push out, is that the reliability of these respective service providers and of the sort of contractual handshakes that you as a user make, as a developer makes between these services, needs to become a little bit more articulated, a little bit more clear. I pushed out a blog post maybe a month ago called Lines in the Sand, where I sort of ticked through what I saw as 6 sort of key things that needed to happen, or areas that we needed to be mindful of, and that hopefully platform service providers would articulate what they were doing in those areas. And so understanding, for example, the separation of layers, because the moment people begin to push their services across layers of the internet, it stymies innovation, And I think it confuses users and it sets us back in terms of the platform that we're overall trying to create as a market.
Are you looking at things like Kinetics and what they're doing to put
Yes.
different displays into like Google, for instance?
Yes, yes. And I'm liking things like that. But the things which make me nervous, I like Chrome. It's a great browser. It's a really fast browser. But the moment I see on the boards that identity is being baked into Chrome, it makes me scratch my head and say, okay, so now I assume that's Google identity and it's not going to be switchable. And so I'm making an assumption there. It may be switchable. I mean, I was surprised that when I loaded Chrome up on one of my computers, I had Twitter as the default search engine on Firefox, and Chrome imported that and placed Twitter as the default search engine. So, there's clearly, the Google guys, I think that they have, of all platform providers in the market to date, their behavior record to date has been pretty great. But I do think that as their core business model changes, as there's disruption to their core business model, their business people, and what it will force them to do is to buckle down on that core and to sort of restrict people from coming into services. And the Google guys are everywhere, right? I mean, it's like, look what's happened in 2009. We got an OS, we got a phone, we've got tablets, we've got
and we got Google Profiles too, which we haven't really talked about too much, but I think that's a foundation layer that is going to be used by Google a lot in 2010.
Yeah. And then Facebook. We haven't talked about Facebook at all on this call, but I mean, in Facebook, there's with Facebook Connect, and I think that a lot of people in 2009 have set up sort of Twitter Google, and I think that the real story is Twitter Facebook. Is Google Facebook, and that is, and we're going to see more of that because I mean, what does Facebook search look like? Right, we know that their pages are now public.
Well, that's why we wanted to have Paul Buchheit on, because I bet he knows a little bit.
I didn't. I wanted Paul on just because friend feed rules, and Facebook is a parasite on the back end of friend feed.
Steve, I've got to take off. This has been a fun show. I got some new companies waiting to talk to me.
Yeah, I saw them trooping in and back to kiss the ring of the great Scoble. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks.
One more question for you, John.
Sure.
Now that I've got you there, what do you think is? I mean, you've talked about Facebook. You've talked about Google. What do you think Microsoft's play is here?
Well, I think Microsoft is in a remarkable position because they are almost the white knight in all this. I say remarkable because 10 years ago, who would have thought that, right? And I think that they have a stake in it, but I think that they are almost more independent in the platform, the underlying Windows platform has now, that's no longer the game that we're playing, and I think that it's we've abstracted up a few layers, and so that Microsoft now has the ability, certainly the cash, certainly the expertise, to play an important role in it. Now, what will they do, and where will they execute? That's left to be seen. I think that Bing was a great starting point. But unless there's going to be something radically new that enters into the Bing sphere in the next few months, I would expect that it's going to follow the same trajectory as Live Search and some of the other things that the Microsoft guys have pushed out on the search front. And so I think they need to go further. They need to differentiate further. They need to, Twitter search. Clearly there was a lot more to be done in the real-time space, and the Bing guys need to go much further with it. And then, you talk a lot about what's happening on the Silverlight front, and I think that it's sort of a layer beneath where I spend most of my time. Mm-hmm. But I think it's real important stuff, and I think there's clearly a lot of innovation simmering there, and there's the potential for a whole platform. The potential. I mean, there's a lot of developers there.
Yeah, I mean, there is a platform there, and a lot of people who have done very well, will probably continue to do well, at least in the corporate enterprise space. Whether they can, it's interesting to me that you talk about some of the constraints or that either Google has or should have regarding, taking over services through their browser/operating system. It's kind of ironic that sounds an awful lot like the kinds of things that Microsoft was hammered back for, in the antitrust period. Do you think that? My take is that this code name for this issue is HTML5, and I really think that HTML5 is more of a stalking horse for the idea that you can achieve ubiquity with an open standard environment and forget the impact and power of companies like Apple and Microsoft that have prospered for a very long time and probably will continue to, on the notion of being able to push out services that people are interested in and using their market force as a way of selling that value proposition. It seems to me that this is that it's going to be harder for a Google to be able to overcome the sort of religious argument of this than it will be for Microsoft to become more open, and I think that's what we're seeing right now. That's basically why I talk about Silverlight, is because I see it as a relatively clean slate for Microsoft to push out into a web OS, and I don't think that it's antithetical or counter to what's going on. We were talking about before, the notion that Nexus One and the iPhone will split the market. I think that's effectively going to be true, because there's a lot of market that is right now sort of pushed down at just below the smartphone layer, that's going to come up into this as the price supports from advertising, sponsorship, and transactional services is going to lower the cost of those devices. So I think that the same thing will be true on the operating system, the web operating system level. There's going to be a larger market that's basically split between these two environments, and over time the differences will become less.
I think that makes sense. I think in the interim, or in our journey to get there, we're going to have there's going to be a lot of tension on these platforms and on the endpoints. I mean, we're clearly seeing a lot of value being created on the client side now, and client endpoints, and I think that Nexus One. I'm looking forward to trying it and to understanding what's on there. But I think that if you look at the Android platform as an entire platform, there's a fair amount of forking that's already going on in that platform.
Sure.
And so you've got the Samsung, you've got the HTC, and you've got the Droid fork. And is Nexus One now going to be another fork? Are there going to be elements and services on that are going to be better on the Nexus One, like search, like voice, like mapping? I mean, the mapping stuff, as Scoble said, is already pretty excellent on the Droid. But is it, I thought it was fascinating on the Droid that on the mapping stuff, it even after you've set your location and you're navigating to a place, once you close down the map application, the voiceover continues even as the device, as you click it off, so the screen's off. So I don't know if app developers in general can get access to what we used to call a DLL, but now it's an API to be able to access that state of the Droid, right? To be able to reactivate it when it's essentially being turned into low power state. I'm just taking that as one instance of, is that going to be something that Google is going to open in general, or are there going to be a set of services that are going to be preferred to the platform provider?
Yeah,
and it's the same story. We've seen this before. And
I agree with you. I think that there's there's a certain amount of humor that can be pushed at them. I was at a off-the-record party at Google where I can't say what they said, but I can say what I said. And what I said basically was, to many of the things that they said, I would say, you sound exactly like somebody. I mean, I'll say it anyway. They were talking about something about getting Silverlight on the
On Chrome.
on Chrome, and the basic comment was, well, we're not getting a lot of requests for that from users. And
Right. We heard that before.
yeah, it's a classic Microsoft evasion for, we don't want to do that. And I think that, using humor as a way of being able to put that kind of, if you're going to bring open to the party, then you're going to have to leave with open. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
I think it's going to be fascinating because, as you said, these guys, open has been a core piece of the architecture that they've pushed into their business model, and it's predicated on everybody else is open, and yet there's a sort of small piece at the center or on the periphery of the network that we control that's closed. And so I think it's going to be fascinating. I think it's going to run right into the arms of some of the regulators. I would doubt it will be here, but my guess is it will be outside of the U.S., but I think it will happen.
Well, I mean, classically, that's been when industries move is when they're threatened with regulation. As in Jack Valenti and the MPAA. All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for appearing. The last time you were on the show, we sort of got cut off just before we got started, and I promised that we would do this again, and I hope we'll be able to do this again frequently in the new year.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. I want to say a very great thanks for 2009 to Rackspace for sponsoring the show. We would not be on the air if it wasn't for Rackspace. And Rob Lejessen in particular has been a great source of inspiration and intelligence and pragmatic advice, and we really appreciate it, and we look forward to continuing with that. And the people at NewTek who have created in the NewTek TriCaster an incredible platform which is already being used by a number of shows like this, and I'm sure that will expand dramatically in this coming year, and we look forward to them joining this network and also to the competition. This is Steve Gillmor. This has been the Gillmor Gang. I want to thank Cliff Garish for all of his help in this and in the development of Newsgang Live, which is an application which is slowly trickling out into the environment, and our producer, Tina Chase. And this is, I want to thank everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.